So the first thing I think of is the quote from Hydra: "It would be good if you complied." So the most important part is, of course, the synopsis, and the synopsis is as follows: Cassian gets locked away on Narkina 5, and it looks at some level like it's minimum security, but unfortunately it really is not minimum security. It's sort of like hell on earth. And it's kind of one of those facilities where they say, well, as long as you behave, you won't get tortured to death. And that's literally what it is. So that's a little bit of a spoiler, but if you really look at it, this whole episode was probably one of the darkest ones. And unfortunately, you're just seeing a lot of torture in this particular episode. So, I mean, if I would say that there would be some kind of downside, there is a lot of torture that happens in this episode. So it was pretty clear that under the direction that there was, and that the director of this episode and the last episode were completely different. That was very, very clear within the first 5 or 10 minutes. And then the actual acting, it was like it was pushed to a different level. It's like the director pushed them into a different zone. So that was something that you could notice within maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes. And plus, like, the pacing was kind of like, it was kind of like moving, especially for Andor, which can be slow in places. But this episode was not really slow. And it really was not like heavy in terms of the action. Like, you weren't seeing like a fight out or a shootout in the sky. That wasn't what was happening. It was just the way they shot, some of the cuts, and it was really mostly just that all the actors were being forced to be on point and take it to a next level. So, for example, Ferrex has changed. Ferrex has been colored by the events in Aldani, and at this point, the Ferrex that we see now, even though there's more oppression and there's more suppression of the people, you can easily see how these crowds of people, which outnumber the Empire like 5 to 1, could go from being like, oh no, 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 please don't shoot, to, flipping that switch. So were there any real drawbacks in this episode? No, not really. I didn't really see any drawbacks. I think, to also get into some of the things, and this is definitely a spoiler, is very clear on Narkina 5, even just watching Andor, that as he's quote unquote playing the stupid new guy, that he's actually like, it's kind of reminiscent in some way his behavior to the Count of Monte Cristo, because you can see in his head his planning out his escape, even though he's not saying it to anybody. You can see him like counting the steps. You can see him analyzing the security. It's just kind of interesting to actually see it. And while some of the other inmates around him, are just like, this dumb new guy, and he doesn't know what's going on. You can actually see like the wheels turning, and he's just sort of like playing dumb. And you're actually like waiting. You're waiting for him to escape. That's what you're really waiting on. And that's one of the things. And then the other thing is, you're trying to figure out what these guys are building all day. What is it that they're actually spending these 12-hour shifts? What are these 12-hour shifts building? What are they using? What are they creating? Are they creating droids? Because that would be kind of interesting, and that would kind of fit in to the bigger narrative of both Andor and Rogue in this like segue of the universe. And so that's kind of interesting. So what does remain a missing for me is something that has been a missing since the heist at Aldani. The whole idea that they need to take care of Cassian. I get it to some extent, but to another extent, it seems really stupid. because you hire a criminal to pull off a heist, and then you're upset that a criminal acts like a criminal. And I'm just saying that because logically, it's a missing, doesn't make any sense. So we've kind of lived with this part of the story. We've kind of accepted this, or at least this has been foisted on us, but it didn't make sense to me when they introduced it. Like the idea that he killed Skeen and like this is a big issue. You know what I mean? It's not really a big issue. You hired a criminal to do a successful robbery, and he pulled off a successful robbery. That's what you hired him for. And then you're like later on, like, well, why is he acting like a criminal? It's just like, that's a missing for me. And unfortunately, I don't care what anybody says. That doesn't make any sense. So this episode was really a very good episode. It was directed by Toby Haynes, who is one of the main directors of the series. He also directed the very first episode, and this one was really, really good. I think that really the acting was probably the best acting that they've had up until now in the series, and that means from start to finish. And I think that really probably is connected to the fact that Toby Haynes is one of the main directors. But definitely this particular episode had the best acting, had some surprise, in quotation marks, people show up. And so you could see like direct ties to Rogue